Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, one that is post covering finance and property news. It's Monday once again, and Edwin is back for another rant. And Edwin, there is so much rubbish going on at the moment. You can't make this up, can you? You really can't.
No, you can't, Martin. And the thing is, the truth's really coming out. So it really comes into to the segment of you. You really can't make this shit up.
Mm.
We're going to discuss what the WeChat chatters are going to be saying or are saying. The reports on why Albanese and the crew are over in China and everything else. But look, you know what? It's funny how last week one of our followers and our viewers put out an X post and said, "Can you do a show on rentals?" And yeah, you asked for it, and you're going to get it.
Yes, Edwin. Yeah, well, I think this is some very important conversation today. But before we get into that, we should just mention, of course, the ABC's very interesting little release, which was basically the treasurer being given advice that we've been saying for a long time is there as well, right? I think it's worth just highlighting that before we get into the specifics on the rental, because all these things are connected, right? The big question, of course, is the question of what's the economy really like, and very importantly, what is the housing story? And so the ABC released the free and fearless Treasury advice, according to Dan Ziffer. Now, this was actually released by mistake, right? They create a so-called red book or a blue book in the event of after the election, and in that, well, they normally don't let any of the information out, but Dan Ziffer actually managed to get the sort of the table of contents, I suppose. And one of the key things there was the fact that their 1.2 million homes target, which we've been saying for a long, long time, is off the scale. It's not going to happen. And there's a little bit of a clip we might just play.
Will not be met. That's really the signature framing device for Labor's housing policy. They're talking all about building supply, and Treasury had some ideas about how they might work better with states and territories to get more homes built, use the migration system and the skills system to get more construction workers to build those homes. But that overarching piece of advice was that this signature target is not going to be met. We knew that it wasn't on track, but to hear it in such blunt terms will put some pressure on Labor to explain.
So there we go. Labour needs to explain why their 1.2 million, or we could explain why their 1.2 million was always a bit of a BS number, right? And it's interesting that the subsequent story there was that Chalmers came out and said, "Oh, I'm pretty relaxed." Yeah, pretty relaxed. I bet he's not really. The 1.2 million homes will fail. Tax hikes and spending cuts were needed if the budget was to be made sustainable. And of course, we've been talking about it for some time. And it's interesting, Chris Richardson basically came back and said, well, we got a glimpse into what the Treasury really thinks. ABC had a lovely scoop. It was a great story. Absolutely it was. The last election campaign was a frustrating one because neither side offered much to grapple with the range of issues. Far better the issues had raised and discussed. If we're to get a better nation, we need a better conversation. And I think this is the point, Edwin. You know, and I know, we've been talking about this for a long, long time. This whole story of 1.2 million homes, and very importantly, the link to migration and the link to incentivizing more people to build more stuff. It's all part of stuff that, guess what, we've been talking about for, well, months and months.
Yeah, and it all ties up. It all comes together. What the government think they're doing is at 180 degrees of what is actually happening. As I keep on saying to our followers and our viewers, it's very important to note that when you actually see cranes in the air, that is when you know that the construction is actually happening. If you don't see cranes up in the air, well, nothing's really happening, or the few cranes that you do see here and there is really just a drop in the ocean in comparison to what is required. from DA approval to actual completion and handing people the keys, it could be anywhere between 3 to 5 years, depending on the size of the building that's coming off the ground. But more importantly is the fact that you and I have been talking about, and I've been talking about for decades. Why are we pushing the younger people? Why are we pushing the first home buyers into dog boxes that we can't even build? Or we're building them in the wrong places, and once you start going beyond 4 levels, there's major consequences, that people are going to encounter. I mean, we're going to talk about some of those issues later on today as well. And it's all around rentals, right? It's all around the premise of rentals. So this whole ambitious target of 1.2, when you've got construction cost going through the roof, and we were first to point that out before it started becoming popular amongst all the property commentators and all people on across all social media and mainstream media as well. So now it's there in black and white. It ain't going to happen, folks. It's not going to happen. So the question that begs to be answered is, what is Albanese really doing over in China? What are they trying to push? And we're not going to be told by the ABC. We're not going to be told by the mainstream media here. The people that will be sharing and more about that as time goes on is going to be the WeChat chatters, which we've got an interesting overview of what they're saying. But now going back to these shortfalls, and then I mean, of course, you're going to start talking about how the young are going to be even squeezed out of the home market, and more to the point is how they're being squeezed out of certain suburbs because they really can't afford the rents. But you and I, again, we've been sharing over and over again, week in, week out. We've been showing the numbers, all in black and white, and we've been following consistency, been consistent with the numbers from the domain region reports that they put on their portal to give us the benchmark. And to think that 10,000 or 11,000 rentals across Sydney is a big number, is a big fallacy, and we really haven't. We really haven't broken the 15,000 mark for a very long time. Before 2019, we were trending close to 22,000. So it's really, and Victoria is another bastard case in itself, given the fact that all the stuff that's happened there as well, and how the government's so-called tried to help the tenants and trying to push investors out so that the properties can be bought or sold cheaply, so that the ledger of tenants can decrease and ownership can increase by first-home buyers. But nobody's buying them. Nobody's buying them, or very few are buying them, because of the many issues that they have, and the many more properties that are about to come on the market there in the near future as well.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, Edwin, I made a show over the weekend, which you may have seen. Property gaslighting continues in spades, right? Because there is this government gaslighting, but there's also the broader gaslighting, specifically relating to the auction clearance rates and the boom in property, right? It's just the numbers are not actually telling us what the spruikers are suggesting the numbers are telling us. And there's a fundamental disconnect between what the industry is saying is happening around property and what is actually happening around property. Just as the government is saying one thing and the truth is somewhat different. And it's this gap between what people are spruiking and the reality that, for me, is the critical issue that people need to understand, right? It's really, really important to understand that the number of auction clearances are completely meaningless. The numbers of property going to auction are way down from where they were previously, for all reasons we've been discussing. A lot of people can't afford to buy property. And interestingly, and very importantly, in that show that I mentioned, I actually went in and looked at unit trends over 10 years in different locations. because, of course, everyone's saying, well, property prices have gone up, 40% over 10 years. No, I pointed to North Ryde properties where prices are still lower. I pointed to Parramatta prices where they're still going sideways. I spoke in the show there about Glebe prices were up just a little. Now, okay, in Western Australia, if you look at Netherlands, they have gone up a bit. But the point is that when you start looking at the granular information, the story that you see there from the data is completely different from the top line spruiking that we're getting both from governments and we're getting from the industry. And I think the industry here, they're doing no more than great service, because more and more people are now just saying it's BS.
Yeah, and this is the thing. The only thing that is certain, Martin, is what Domain or the Sydney Morning Herald put out, and that is that a lot of dreams are being shattered. And the unfortunate thing is that the dreams are being shattered, and that's because a lot of the young people believe too much in the governments, and they fall for the lies of and hand over the votes willy nilly, and this is the aftermath. Whereas the savvy, those that have been following the show, those that have been following the show consistently and follow our tips, they're being at the forefront. Many have shared with us how they've been able to secure 12-month leases, 24-month leases, and even 36-month leases in order to have that stability for the whole family and young families that need to go to particular schools, or they themselves, the adults themselves, have had, or even the children have required certain medical attention, and they need to be within certain medical facilities. So, but unfortunately, many, there are a lot that don't follow our advice. There are a lot that believe they're spooky, but at the same time, there's also the other side of that of the canyon, and that is the ones that put out all this hype and also believe that that the markets are going to drop overnight, or you really got to take it in. You got to take it in your own stride, and you got to take it into your own. You got to, as you say, you got to look at things granular. Got to look at the type of property. You got to look at the what it is that people are after, what they're seeking. There are some parts of Sydney that as we've shared and we broke, and because of the different groups that are moving that create the trends amongst the different markets in Sydney as to what they're looking for. And there are some parts of Sydney where you look at the older style three-story walk-ups where they're absolutely gone gangbusters over the last 12 months. But again, like you said, Martin, there are parts, your North Rydes, your parts of Bankstown, parts of Liverpool, and the list goes on. Blacktown, where the newer apartments are absolutely a money pit. And hence the reason why a lot of investors want to get out. But we said that from 3 years ago when the WeChat Charter said get out of your dud investments, and that when we said that the WeChat Charters were calling to get out of that investments was the high-rise developments because of the sheer costs. Now, how does that affect the rental market? Well, it takes away from the pool of rental properties, and hence the reason why we're floating around. We've been floating around the 11,000 rental properties on market, and if you split that across homes and apartments, typically an apartment's cheaper to rent than a home. But so there's that push, and there's that competition to get the lower range rentals in order not to fall into the other trap, which is the cost of living crisis as well. So add to this whole issue, you're adding numbers, you're fueling the demand side, and you're in a world of pain.
Absolutely. And just to underscore how much pain the data for Sydney, this is based on Domain data. Sydney rents hit record highs, and you can see there the 2.8% increase. Gross asking prices for typical Sydney home hit $780 a week after rising 2.8%. And the asking rent for units has hit $740 a week. That's again a 2.8% increase. And this is the point, really, that we've been saying for some time that it's getting worse and worse. And going right back to my modeling and the rental stress is very high. 75% of households in the rental sector having cash flow issues, trying to manage their, just to get by, just to manage their finances. And hence that other article we referred to, Sydney rents soar again at the bottom of the market. It's increasing rental stress that's seriously exacerbating poverty and homelessness. That's from Peter Tulip. Now, Peter Tulip, of course, of the high-rise build fame. But dreams are being crushed, and I think that's exactly the point. But going back to this issue of the rental story, beyond that, and going back to Sean's comment, it's worth just trying to understand a bit more about the rental properties and what's going on here. And specifically, I think the question of how different it is from 20 to 30 years ago is an important question because, of course, things have changed dramatically over that time. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time in a bit more detail, specifically looking at some of these issues in the rental sector. And I guess the point here is we've got more high-rise stuff being built. We've got more high-rise stuff of poor quality being built. We've got more high-rise stuff that has more things to go wrong, which means effectively the strata fees are much higher. And we also have agents that are actually spending less and less and less time per unit managed to be able to actually deal with the issues that are there. So that's sort of the first part of it. And then the second part of it is, well, where's the demand coming from? And interestingly, again, I see it in my one-to-one conversations, Edwin, more and more people are getting a bit shy of wanting to go and look at high-rise because of the fact that prices have gone sideways or down in so many areas, and the costs of buying in and the ongoing costs are just much higher. So there is massive contention here, which I think we need to try and unpick a bit tonight.
Yeah, look, with regards to the cost, I mean, typically investors opted to buy into your apartment, and they've created the apartment portfolios. That was your more or less your first introduction to investing in decades gone by. Because it was a cheap way to get into the investment ladder, or a way to get into buy your first your first property, and then leverage off that into a house. Now there's so much fear and so many concerns around the construction, where you look at what you're actually getting from a rental return in comparison to what's going out. I mean, there are strata levies that are absolutely gobsmacking mud, where you're looking at in apartment complexes where the rents are around $650 a week, and the quarterly levies, including your sinking funds, they're upwards of $4,000 per quarter. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So the interesting thing that there's rumors. And that is there are a lot of vacant apartments because they can't be lived in because of the issues that they're facing, and they haven't been able to get them repaired. I'm speaking with two-tier builders, the ones that can actually attend to the dilapidation issues of high-rise. They're a higher license than your first-tier license holders. You've got to have special licenses, which we shared a little bit about. My mates, when we talked about the issue with the water proofing issue in the balcony, where they're getting $60,000 to $70,000 to repair a 4 or 5 square meter balcony with waterproofing issues. I mean, that's absolutely insane. So that is one of the deterrents, local deterrents, that's keeping investors away from new builds. because they're just not going to get the money back. It's just really a money pit. The only ones that are moving into those high-rise developments and buying off the plan are the ones that got hoodwinked by their accountants or mortgage brokers or financial planners that con them into putting the self-managed super funds into these, because they don't realise that these individuals don't, they moonlight as real estate agents by the evening, and they don't disclose the fact that they're getting upwards of $35,000 to $55,000 commission on the sale of a new, whether it be a dog box out at Schofield, or whether it be one closer to the city. They're all the same, and they're all badly built, but they're copying a massive commission, and the self-managed super funds are the ones that are jumping in. Unfortunately, and then they end up paying the cost later on. So the government, as I said before, they're in a conundrum. They're in a bit of a conundrum because they need to bring they need to bring flesh blood into this melting pot. They need to bring sacrificial lambs into the slaughterhouse, because nobody else is buying, and the developers certainly won't be building because of the high costs, and they've got to have an exit strategy, and the exit strategy basically doesn't put any money in their pocket. So they don't want to basically be working for 5 years and not make any money. And more to the point is the fact that the banks won't lend them the money in the first place unless they show a minimum of 22% gross profit at the end. So this is the conundrum that the governments that the federal state governments are in, and this is why they've got to lobby countries abroad. We saw that with Perrottet. We called it when Perrottet went over to India. We've been calling it before the election, where the Labor took the helm, as to what was going to happen, and we're going to call it again as to what's going to happen moving forward with this latest trips that Albo has been taking. So it's a dilemma. The locals don't want to touch high rise in terms of rentals. They're forced into high rise, but there's more warning signs and warning bells that are ringing, and that we're going to share one in particular that is really alarming. And we've got the receipts, Martin. And this is the thing: whenever we talk about something, we bring the receipts, and we can bring it to light, and we're talking about it, and probably nobody else is definitely talking about this because they want to hide it. They want to hide the real issues with high-rise development.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get on to one specific issue in a second. But just before I do that, I want to share a conversation I had this last week, one-on-one conversation. This was a couple looking at buying off-the-plan high-rise apartment, right? It was a small apartment, one-bedroom apartment, not in a very great location, but they were thinking about it as a relatively long-term investment strategy, right? And so they went and had a look at the details, and they sent me the specifications. And I highlighted the fact that the property that they were looking at, which was a one-bedroom on the 5th floor, you looked at extras. Extras included, did you want air conditioning? Extras, right? Did you want a superior kitchen? Extras, right? Did you want a car parking space in the basement? Extras. Did you want a storage space in the basement? Extras. So actually, wherever you look, it's more and more and more going into that initial entry to get into the property. So that was the first issue. They hadn't thought through, how much does we really need? And of course, that added an extra 100,000 or so on the so-called purchase price, right? The second is lag time. So how long would it be between committing and actually getting it? And they were saying, well, it could be a year to 18 months, but we can't be very clear on when we're actually going to be able to complete the construction. Okay. And then there was a clause that said, and we reserve the right to increase the costs if our input costs rise. So they were signing effectively on a wobbly number, on top of a wobbly number. And It was on the 5th floor, but this apartment was one on a 5th floor out of 20 floors. So they were having to think through the implications of being halfway up a building, or a third of the way up a building. But you've got all the issues of the strata fees. And so I asked them, what have you been told about the strata fees? And they've been told nothing about the strata fees. They've got no estimates as to what the strata fees might be. So I suggested they might want to give a little bit of a poke to the people who are trying to sell them this thing about what the strata fees might be. And they refused. So what they were being asked to do was to buy a property without buying into what the full price was going to be, without buying into what the strata levies might be. And then my final question was, did you look around the area? How many other high-rise apartments are in plan or have been approved? And they were horrified to discover that there were another 12 high-rise apartments being built in the same area. So you buy in at an uncertain price point, right? But if you're holding this property and you've got more and more supply coming on, what's that going to do to the price? So to my mind, and I'm seeing this again and again, people are actually being hoodwinked into committing to buy off the plan high-rise apartments with not enough information to make a good decision. And I'm sorry, but this is just standard in the industry.
Yeah, but this is and look, I'm going to take a stab in the dark, Martin, and perhaps off the record, you can share with me later on. I can guess it's in the self-managed super fund, and I can have a guess that it's their accountant or their financial planner that's putting them onto this great deal.
Spot on both points. And I actually did ask the question, where did you get this idea from? And it was actually their accountant who suggested they should do this. And then I said, well, have you asked them whether they're actually going to make any commission or any return if you actually commit to this particular agreement? And interestingly, they did ask their accountant, and they let me know after our conversation that the accountant was due to get a $35,000 payment if this was successful.
Yeah, this is see, it doesn't take. I'm not a rocket scientist, by the way. So it's just I've seen it all. I've seen it all, and these poor bastards end up with a lemon, as you say, and the strata levies that they get told that they're going to be around the 750 end up being 3,500 per quarter after the first year, and then you're not only competing. You're competing in the block for tenants, and then the strata manager that's put in place is in cahoots with the builder and the developer, because it's all shaky deals. It's all dodgy liaisons, dangerous liaisons, as Jennifer Duke and myself, we put out a video a good 12, 15 years ago, before all this stuff became very popular. I've since taken it off YouTube somewhere in there, but it's all the dangerous liaisons. And why? Because and this is why you've got the issues with Mascot Towers. This is why you've got the issues with a lot of high-rise developments. Is because of the strata managers are not going to bite the hand that feeds them. They're not going to bite them, and they're not going to they're not going to get the proper reports in order to chase the developer, chase the builder, to do the rectification work that is required before the first 2 years. They have to do specific reports, within 6 months, or 6 months before the first 2 year lapses, in order to force the builder to do the works. And then this BS. I can't remember the premier at the time that I spoke to on 2GB with regards to the 2% levy that they were going to take in order to protect the buyers in high rise. That was all bullshit. I brought it to his attention then, and that when I was speaking with him on the radio, and I said, this is BS. 2% means nothing to a developer. 2% means that, because if they're giving 5 to 8% away as commissions. I mean, you can see how much they've loaded on the price. Everything is paid for by the purchaser. as I said, in order to coerce people moving forward, Martin, locals to move forward and buy apartments, watch this space. You're going to get offered a BYD in the basement. You're going to get offered, what do you call it, a set of steak knives, and a coffee machine, and furniture packages, because no one in their right mind from the local perspective, unless those that are desperately wanting to buy something or get conned into buy with a self-managed super, are going to want to touch the high roads because of what they can learn online.
Absolutely. And I will just make one final point about the particular case study. The deal was effectively they would underwrite to pay the equivalent of the rent for the first 12 months if they couldn't let it. So basically it was risk-free for the first 12 months, right? Risk-free, they said. And I'm thinking, yeah. So, I mean, all we want to say is don't let the, sales spiel mask the true questions that need to be asked, because these are really, really important decisions that people are taking. And unfortunately, there are lots of hangers-on who are actually benefiting from all of this process. But there's another interesting observation, and this is where you've actually got some real chapter and verse stuff here. Think about the lifts, right? The lifts are actually really important in these high-rise, right? I mean, it's no mean feat if you're on the 5th floor or the 20th floor. But the question is, what happens when the lift breaks down?
This is scary, Martin. This is scary, and this is going to become mainstream news, and it's going to become mainstream news very soon, because a lot of these lifts, after 10 years, they require a major upgrade, and a major upgrade can mean that they could be out of commission. Now, if they are deemed not to be safe, and not to be fit for use, that will be decommissioned. And especially under the new strata regulations that have come in because of all the issues that over the last half decade or so that strata has been facing. So this is really interesting. The first thing is that the time lapse, the time period in order to fix these lifts. I mean, you've got a 4-month turnaround period. That's the first thing. That's minimum of 4 months to complete a full tender process in order to see who's going to, obviously, because of the high value to fix the lifts, who's going to be repairing or replacing the lifts. It could take up to 4 months. Now, this is as I said, we've got the receipts. Now, after that, in order to procure the procurement lead times for new lift equipment ranges between 28 to 36 weeks for manufacturing of the new equipment and international shipping to Australia. That's if you get a good run. That's on if you get a good run, and if Xi Jinping and Trump don't start taking it out. Against Taiwan or some shit like that. And then you've got a 10 to 12 weeks in terms of full replacement. Now, the scary part with this complex is that there are 2 lifts in a complex of about 102 apartments. The problem is, Martin, is that the apartments are separated over 2 blocks. Each block contains on average 50 apartments. So one has 56, the other one has less. So, but there's only 1 lift in each block. Each block is four stories high, and there's 2 basements. So if you're the poor bastard that's in basement 2, and you park your car there and there's no lift, well, you've got to walk up. What is it? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. You've got to walk up 16 flights of stairs in order to get to your apartment. Now, so we've almost, if the lift breaks down, or if it's deemed not to be worthy to be operated, you're sidelined. You're sidelined. You've got to go up the emergency stairwells. Now, think about the implications, Martin. Think about the people that have each complex but by law has to have adaptable units. They have to make, adaptable units are what we used to know as, what we used to call them for the use of the disabled units we used to call them, but their actual the right terminology is adaptable units. So they have to have the adaptable units, and that could be anywhere in the block. So how do they get to? How do they go? They go. How do they get? They go down to do the shopping. How does a mother or a father or a parent with carting 2, 3 kids go down the stairwells and go to the shops, to the local shops. Um, and then there's the unforeseen as well. What if in between these 2 years your lease expired and you wanted to move? This is one of those. It's no longer a grenade, Martin. It's actually 40 pounds of TNT about to go off in the property industry. And a lot of these complexes, guess what, Martin? They're over 10 years old.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because quite often, of course, lifts go wrong, for the odd little bit, and they need to be a bit maintained and what have you. But if you have a lift that effectively is non-accessible for 20 to 24 weeks, I mean, that is a remarkable, problem for many people. But the other thing is the cost, just the pure cost. I don't know when anybody has a bit of a sense of what the cost would be, but here we are. Here's an estimate. If you had the full replacement of lift 1 and lift 2, including removing the existing lift equipment and then putting a new machine room less passenger lift into an existing lift shaft, well, we're talking $500,000 plus. Now, who's going to pay for that?
Of course, the owners have to pay, but just going a step back, Martin. You've actually the lift could be out of commission for almost 24 months. The 20 to 24 weeks is just once the parts and once the lift is in the country, that's how long it'll take them to replace the lift. In between then and the procuring the lift or organizing the shipment, you're sidelined for another. You're sidelined for another 16 months. So the lifts could be out of commission for 2 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, very interesting. And it does beg the question, doesn't it? Exactly how this is all going to play out for people who basically have got into the property and they're already seeing their strata fees beginning to rise. And the question now is, what's ahead? Well, you can pretty much be sure that the strata levies are going to rise. They're going to definitely be very much more significant than they were previously, and that's going to continue. So this is the steady pressure, increasing pressure on people in those high rise. Now, the first thing that happens is you'll find that the odd tenant or the odd owner just doesn't pay. And of course, that means that you get a bit of a sort of a feedback loop. And as we discussed the other week, one of the most significant bankruptcy events that, for example, in Canberra was reported was people who actually can't pay the strata levies. So that puts more pressure then back on the rest of the owners of the property and the strata committee. And what do? Do they put the fees up for everybody else? And does it become an ever decreasing circle of people who can actually afford to pay? This is the problem, because there is no control on this at all. And it's interesting because in our last show we discussed specifically strata levies, and somebody said to me afterwards, well, you're making a mountain out of a molehill here, because a lot of strata companies are actually managed really well and there's no issues here, and anyway, you got to vote on it. Well, yeah, some may be, but unfortunately, again, from my experience and my conversations, there are a lot of people who are finding that the strata fees are just going up and up and up, and more and more and more things are actually coming out from the woodwork. And then the other thing, of course, it's just worth highlighting, it's not like it's a static environment. So in Victoria, we've already seen significant increases in the rules and regs around rental reform, and there's more coming. This is actually very interesting. So in the past 6 years, more than 130 rental reforms have passed through the state of Victoria. So it's no wonder that investors seem like the goalposts are always changing, and that's the point. So more and more, it's becoming very, very complicated and difficult. In fact, this article suggests that around 24,000 rental homes have been lost from investors fleeing Victoria because of the extra regulations. Now, whether that's exactly right in terms of the numbers, who knows? But the point is, this is a big deal.
Look, it is, Martin, and this is why we and more investors are going to be jumping ship in Melbourne, and those stories, those spooky stories about, oh yeah, Melbourne's is right for investors. Come one, come all. You get yourself a bargain, and look at these great people that are buying. That, in my opinion, it's very, very premature because of the changes that are more changes that are going to come. And in the second part of that article that I sent you, we're going to start talking about where the rubber meets the road, and this is where you got to dig deep as an investor. Now, this is where where it's gonna really start hurting. Like from November, properties must meet certain standards before being advertised. Now, we've been talking about these standards. We've been talking about the minimum standards. They've been put into legislation, but they get the real estate sector gets given a time of grace before they start really enforcing them, and they start biting into the pockets of investors. So as certain standards before being advertised, not just when a renter moves in. This covers safety, heating, air conditioning, and insulation, which are in addition to the minimum standards added in 2021 from 1st of December. All window cords will need safety anchors, and from 30th of October, ceiling insulation and draft ceiling are becoming standard, especially for new leases or when old systems require replacement or repairs. So this is where you're basically going to be forking out anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000 on the renewal of a lease or a new tenant before you can lease it out again. That's what it's going to cost you in order to get your older property in line with the new rates. And Victoria are vicious. They will enforce them. They will enforce this, and they will start finding people. And guess what, folks? They need the taxes, and taxes comes in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. And fines is one of them. And this is where a number of investment groups that we deal with are saying, we've got no option but to just sell, because it's the added costs. It's this government mentality. Now, let me say this before we go on, Martin, and I've said it before a number of times. I believe that a lot of these regulatory instruments that are being brought in are not a bad thing, right? But it's just the way that they're being lumbered on and being amassed with everything else. With your land tax hikes, with your energy costs and your stupidity around the usage of gas and everything else has just meant that it's left a bad taste in the mouths of investors, and they're basically hightailing it. As I said, a lot of these legislated changes are not a bad thing, and it's about time that investors forked out and got the rental properties into shape. But it's when you add it with everything else, when you lump it in with everything else, that it becomes a major issue. In other words, the way that it's being rolled out is the issue. And this is where and this is what I've said, that a lot of the places and a lot of the movement from the WeChat chatters, and they're still opting out from the fringes, the outer fringes of the Melbourne region, the equivalents of our western suburbs and southwest regions, where they're opting out, and where the demographics is one that has also created issues in amongst the locals and people have just simply had enough. And hence the reason why you see a lot of these areas decreasing in price. And I for one, don't believe that the price drops have stopped and the rebounding back like a lot of mainstream media articles are saying. I for one believe that they've still got to run another 5 to 10% downwards.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, certainly, going back to my earlier show that I mentioned at the top, we're seeing prices go sideways. Interestingly, going back to Sean's question, and we've highlighted some of the issues, but he also talked specifically about the difference today, 20 to 30 years ago. And I will start just outlining a couple of thoughts there, Edwin. The first is that, of course, 20 to 30 years ago, the people who were managing the rental properties would have been older and more qualified and would have had a smaller portfolio to manage. Today, most of the people who are actually managing these portfolios have a huge, larger portfolio because the costs are higher. Frankly, despite all the rules and regs and all the qualifications, are less qualified than previously. But the other thing is just that the economic differences today, because the pressure on property strata fees and on the managing agents themselves means they don't give the time that they used to deal with the issues as they come up. So if you actually are a renter and you've got an issue, trying to get a property manager to do anything about it today is much more difficult than it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Look, you've hit on some very great points there, and this is what George and I have been saying, for almost 2 decades, is how the property management arena, and I love property management. I spent 18 years pretty much looking over the rent rolls and being more in line with the property management department than in the sales side of things. But the landscape changed dramatically 15, 20 years ago was when we started witnessing and seeing the changes with because a lot of the licensees in charge, they didn't want to employ the property managers that had history, because they didn't want to pay them what they were worth. A good property manager would would take home 25% more than your property officers. And that would be paid above the award if you really wanted to keep them. And a lot of them did the transition into sales, sadly, and quite a number of them that I knew from back then went into commercial management, property management, because it was the portfolio was a lot less. There was there was a cutoff time. Commercials are a lot different. So you didn't have to deal with landlords and tenants post 5 o'clock, more or less. And the 20, 30 years ago, property managers were a lot more passionate about the industry than what they are now. What you've got now is you've got look, and I'm just going to say it the way I see it, and I'm just going to say it because of the different issues and the different. A lot of our clients, when they buy investment properties, when we help them buy properties, we also try to place them with local agencies that will look after the management of the property, because we no longer manage properties, and we reach out. But the changes are so vast and so rapid. One of the changes that I've been speaking about for a while is the fact that there are a lot of officers are employing young, I call them kids, right? Teenagers. They don't even know how to wipe their bloody nose, let alone manage the tension that is out there. So the landscape's become a lot harder to deal with in terms of a property manager now has to be a freaking marriage counselor, psychologist, basically a counselor in the most part, and you have to deal with a lot of emotion. I'm surprised that we're not reading or hearing or people aren't talking as much about assaults on property managers. I know in certain areas of Sydney, the some of my old associates that I've got to know over the 3 decades, they won't let female property managers or property officers deal with in certain areas, either on their own or at all, because of the nature of the demographic and the nature of the landscape. It's just waving a red flag to a bull. So you got these changes. The most alarming change over the last 5 years, and I say it's very, very alarming, is the fact of all the outsourcing that is happening from your day-to-day requirements that property managers and property officers had to fulfill, such as your periodic inspections. They're being outsourced. So a property manager doesn't even know the property that they're managing, let alone the tenant, and they'd be lucky to have ever met the landlord. I mean, that is bullshit, Martin. That is absolute. If I was 10 years younger, I could rattle and roll that cage, and I'd jump back in, and I'd get really stuck into it. But it's just it's not my time, and my time's passed now from setting up another property management team. But I'll tell you what, that landscape or that sector is starving for a good property management workforce or team, and they do very, very well. There's just no connection between the like I said, they're outsourcing the periodic inspections. They're outsourcing this is even worse. The owners of these teams, or the owners of the offices, the licensees in charge, and the owners, they're outsourcing even the accounting, the day-to-day record keeping, which is absolutely astonishing that you could outsource, and you'd be willing to outsource to, be it India, Pakistan, or Vietnam, as well as the Philippines. But you're asking for trouble. You're really, really asking for trouble under the new regulations, the cybersecurity regulations, because if you get hacked, I mean, and you haven't got things in place, you're screwed. Your insurance won't cover you. So they're outsourcing that, and also the financials. So they're outsourcing the data that's been collected when people apply, which is absolutely, in my opinion, it's criminal, because that should not leave the office, and that should be dealt with accordingly. And I mean, back in the day when I started, we used to have things in the old filing cabinets that were made out of almost you'd swear they were made solid steel, and they had locks, and some companies, some offices even had safes where they'd keep the hard copy files. And now everything's online, everything's on the cloud, but you don't even have custody of those records anymore, Martin. A lot of property managers and property officers have lost custody because they're being handed over to, as I said, to companies that have outsourced to other countries, which is crazy. It is absolutely crazy shit. So if you're a tenant, you got to make sure that your information is well taken care of. Your personal information, all that data, they keep it, and they've got to keep it in their records for minimum 3 years. So, and this is the problem. But again, I say, then you've got accounting, and even trust accounting, which is crazy. I just say, in my opinion, the industry's lost the plot. Why? To save money. To save money, and commissions have gone down. or what they're asked. Insurances have actually gone through the roof, but it's no fault of anybody else other than the industry bodies themselves that haven't kept an eye on how this whole thing should have evolved, and we should be in a much better position. We should be the offering as property managers to the general public should be a better offering than what they get now.
Absolutely. Well, it is very concerning what's going on there. And certainly, again, from my one-to-one conversations, people have been messed around by the property managers. I also don't think that many investors necessarily feel that they're getting value from the property managers too. So that's another factor. So you either try and manage it yourself, or you sort of shop around. But it's a little bit of a chaos. But I guess, small mercies. The UK's bit further ahead, possibly looking at this, looking at some of the things that they're talking about there with the, the things they have to do. Yeah, I don't know whether it's really worse in the UK, but I have to tell you that recent experience has shown me that in the UK, these issues are also writ large, and they're actually even worse. There's more regulations coming. There's more requirements for insulation. And once again, guess what? The management processes around the property sector have also been completely broken. They've got these young upstarts now who've got no understanding what it means to be providing customer service. There's more rules and regulations coming all the time, and it's getting more and more difficult. And by the way, the costs are rising. The rental returns are not rising, despite the fact the rents are going up. And that tells you, I think, everything you need to know. Now, just before we go on, we should just touch briefly on the China visit and Albo. And he's bailed the cat, really, hasn't he? The purpose of this is to bring more people into Australia, as far as I can see.
Well, look, yeah, it's what the government tells us is one thing. What the WeChat chatterers are saying is a total different thing. Their observation, and basically what they're saying is that Albo's gone in there, clasping his hands on his knees, begging for money. Albo's talking about tourism, and in actual, this is the interpretation from the WeChat chatterers. What they're saying that he's gone there. Begging for money because of and taking advantage of the global issues and I guess what would you call it, the issues that China is having with a lot of the other Western countries, and he wants to capitalize on that. He wants to capitalize on the simple fact that his bosses, the vice chancellors and chancellors of the universities, want him to bring in more students. So bringing in more students means more renters. More renters, happy days for the WeChat chatterers and their investors, because they know how to milk that they know how to get blood out of that stone. And so we're basically going to be importing a lot of renters. What he thinks he's going to be getting, what they're saying, what he thinks he's going to be getting is tourism, but as you and I know, Martin, that tourism leads into a larger number of ghost migrants, the people that overstay their visas, and guess where they go and work? They go and work in the construction industry predominantly, because that's where they can hide. That they can best hide in amongst the working crews. So but the tourism that he's seeking is not going to happen, Martin, because what the WeChat chatterers are saying is because of the restrictions, because the Chinese are a little bit smarter. They're now delegates, and they know that if they open the floodgates for tourism from China into Australia, that a lot of money will leave their shores, and they don't want that. They don't want that pathway of the money. There's different pathways, obviously, that are being worked on. As I'm a firm believer that from my conversations with the WeChat chatterers is the golden visa pathways, but that's a different that's under a different category. That's another conversation for another day, because we need that investment in order to sustain the SME sector here in Australia. But for now, what he thinks he's going to get in spending over $109 million with this website that is that is funneled money into to promote tourism into Australia. What he thinks he's going to get is one thing, but what they can see that he's going to get is a lot more students, which means a lot more renters. Which is hooray for the campuses and those that have got hot bedding or room letting or affordable lettings all around the university campuses, because they're going to capitalize on it. It's going to put a greater pressure on the rental market in cities such as Sydney, the Sydney region, and also your parts of Melbourne and Brisbane.
And as you say, clue, hashtag more renters. Enough said, I think, on that one. It is quite interesting. And I'm afraid that I get very, very upset with the stupid reporting coming out of the visit. Of course, the ABC is there, but they're being very filtered in terms of what they're talking about. And a lot of the other stuff is not being reported very widely. I wonder why that is. There's definitely stuff going on that probably we should be hearing more of than we are. But hey, in the current environment, maybe that's what we should expect. Well, as we come to the end of the show, we will just briefly touch on the numbers. If we look in Sydney, on the 7th, we had 19,511 properties listed in Domain, 19,916 a week later, so a small rise. And we can see there that the listings are still tracking higher than the last couple of years and are moving up slightly, which is perhaps what we'd expect to see. But I'm not sure that we're seeing a massive flood of sales following. And then if we look in Melbourne, on the 7th, we had 25,151, 24,996 on the 14th. But there's a really interesting little indicator here, Edwin. The number of blocks of land added is very high.
We go back to Sydney, the Sydney numbers. We've had an increase of about 500-600 properties from last week in terms of listed on market for sale as of 4 o'clock, Monday, this afternoon. 600 blocks of land almost have come on the market over the last week. So that's why the numbers are creeping back up. It'll be interesting to see whether the numbers are going to continue to rise, because and if they're going to translate into more land envelopes, subdivisions that are being opened up in your northwest, west, and southwest regions, or whether we're going to get a lot more local. And this is why it's important when you look at the numbers to look at your specific area of choice, where you're looking at buying or where you're looking at selling. And see what's on the market and what's not on the market, because obviously these numbers are just in general terms across the Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane region, according to Domain.
Absolutely. We'll just touch on Brisbane briefly. On the 7th, 3,402, and then 3,393 the week later. But just briefly on this land listing thing, I had the chance to do a one-on-one conversation recently about Lennox Head, which is up in northern New South Wales. And that got me looking at the number of land releases, not just there, but more broadly. And there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of blocks of land coming on the market or being listed for sale. And I'm just astonished at the volume that's there. But I'm also equally astonished at just how few are selling. So there's a flood of stuff coming on the market, but almost nothing is moving. And the interesting observation that in my research, I was talking to the people up in Lennox Head, and they were saying that the councils actually walked back. So they were talking about some higher density development. But in and around Lennox Head, there's been a pushback now. And so some of the what's called R3, which is the higher density, they've moved back to R2 now because of the fact that they were worried about the local character of the place being changed. But I'm thinking these thousands and thousands of plots of land that are all over the place up in northern New South Wales, and it's just not there actually, it's more broadly too, tells you something very important about the state of the real estate industry.
Yeah, but nobody wants to go up there and build. The builders are gone.
Yep.
Wait until they start cranking up the construction around Queensland, Brisbane for the in preparation for the sporting events that are coming up. It is going to be absolutely diabolical. I mean, we've got 7,000 or over 7,000 building companies, small to medium-sized building companies that have gone bust over the last 2 years. And I don't know how many trades companies, subcontractors they've taken with them. So and then but you're just adding, you're just piling on, and as we shared last week, the BS around the actual percentage or the numbers, when you start looking at the real numbers as to skilled migrants and that actually enter the workforce, the construction workforce, but more in the areas, more in your management roles such as architecture, engineers, in more in the white collar sector than in the blue collar sector, and so we're losing a lot of the working force to state government planning and how they're basically spreading the infrastructure. And its infrastructure in a lot of cases it's very questionable, but we're tying up all the local resources, and yet we're bringing in hundreds of thousands of new migrants, but yet only a small number of them will actually enter the workforce in terms of the construction industry. And then you've got issues with the the unions, and I mean it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. If you think a plate of spaghetti that falls on your lap is messy, mate, that's got nothing on where the construction industry is.
Well, I agree. And just to add to that, did you see that ASIC actually put out a report talking about the number of businesses that had gone through a new process whereby they can basically write down or write off some of their tax owing and things like that? 23% of those that actually have gone through a restructuring process, actually, so this isn't defaults, this isn't actually closures, this is people trying to restructure their business to survive. 23% were actually in the building and construction sector. So it's interesting that the ATO has now basically allowed people to write off some of the tax they owed, taxpayers, of course, picking up the tab, to try and stop more builders falling over. So I thought that was quite interesting as well. So yeah, crazy times. And again, from my SME surveys, I'm seeing more and more pressure on more and more builders at the moment. It's not good. So even if you can find a plot that you want to buy, trying to find a builder to build is, well, good luck with that. Let's just look at the auctions briefly, Edwin. And interesting, the numbers were relatively low again. Clearance rates still not where people thought they were. And I get very frustrated when I made a show about it, as you know, about the clearance rates not telling you anything. But it is interesting looking at the numbers, and they are still very low.
They are, and they continue to track a lot lower than 2024. And again, it's a story that still hasn't been picked up by the mainstream. All they want to tell you is that the clearance rates are at 76%, but on the amount of numbers, the very low this week. Okay, it's still school holidays, but if people want to sell, they want to sell. It goes back to our premise, and that is that people are sick and tired of the way that the mainstream and the industry beat the drum around auctions, and they create all this illusionary results and figures and hype around, and both vendors and buyers are finally waking up to the smoke and mirrors BS that the industry and the sale by auction is created. And I can't wait until we see 200 on the number chart, and then maybe then the mainstream will pick up our story that we've been sharing for the last 6 or 4 months, a good part of this year.
Well, as I said at the top of the show, the problem is that the media are just pumping, trying to get more people to buy, but it isn't the story that they should be looking at. But of course, nobody wants to talk about the true story. And talking about the true story, just on the latest movements on prices, you can see the value trackers, a little bit up, a little bit down, but nothing here that really is underscoring a significant change in trajectory from what we've been talking the last few weeks.
No, it just the top end market in Sydney is still very shaky. There's in certain parts of Sydney that would otherwise you'd see property just put on the portals by way of auction. They're not there because there's still a lot of concern out there, more so by the marketing campaigns themselves, and what people are. Look, we've reached certain peaks in certain markets, right? So people are finally waking up and saying, hell, why am I actually paying 1,000, between 1,400 and 1,600 per hour to somebody that just turns up for half an hour on a Saturday and then gets a group of people in the front lawn to throw their hands up in the air, and you get in the eastern suburbs you get most of the buyers are buyers agents that just earn their quid by just throwing their hands up in the air and losing money for their clients. I think it's all people just waking up to it, Martin. There's to the fact that the industry is a lazy industry, and sale by auction, as I've said for almost 3 decades, does not get you the best result in the best of times.
Absolutely. Well, let's just look at the rentals before we close out. So here you can see that in Sydney on the 7th, there were 12,034 listed, dropped to 11,907 on the 14th. And on the 7th in Melbourne, 12,032 and a fall to 11,920. So another little drift down there. But again, just to highlight what we said earlier on, rents are still very high. The affordability is extremely stretched, and that's putting a lot of pressure on a lot of renters, as we discussed. Which brings us quite nicely, Edwin, to the end of the show. Before I throw back to you for your final thought, I just wanted to throw one little thought out to you because I thought you might find this quite interesting. There's this. Could a gold revaluation be the last lever left for a debt-sick America? So there's now rumors that maybe Trump is going to actually reprice the gold on their balance sheet. It's a very low number at the moment. It's something like $20,000 or something, right? If they did, that could be another spanner in the works for the global economy and very significant impact on broader markets. So that's one to watch. But more immediately, Edwin, you've got some thoughts too, specifically in the leasing sector.
Yeah, look, it's that time. I believe it's that time of the month where you need to call your property manager, and you need to beg, plead, and grovel if you have to. And look, I know most of our followers and viewers have got good relationships with those that are renting out, because we've told them to build good relationships with the property managers. Get to know them, because especially if you're going to be in that position of being a renter. Whether you're a rent investor, whether you're a long-term renter, whatever the situation is, if you know that you're going to be a renter for a long time, you need to get to know your property manager, because it's harder to say no to a friend than it is to say no to a stranger. And if you're a stranger, it'll be easier to say no to you. So yeah, in tongue in cheek, I say beg, plead, or grovel for those extra 12 months. 24 months. Even if if you've still got 3 or 4 months to go, and you should start talking to them about renewing your lease. And I know, again, our followers and viewers of, most of them, if not all, number one, AAA tenants, and I'm sure that their property managers will listen, and we'll put it to the landlords to extend that, because there's a lot more coming. There's a lot more pressure, rental pressure coming in, before the end of the year.
Yeah, so the message is plan ahead. Just leave it to the last week or two, and engage early and get to know your property manager. There are some good ones out there still, despite what we said earlier on. Unfortunately, you've got to seek them out. Edwin, thank you very much. Very important conversation again tonight, as always. And I'll look forward to next week. Who knows what we're going to talk about then, because there'll be so much more that we can poke the stick at. But the bottom line is, people, be cautious, be careful, and don't believe the BS.
All the best, Martin. You look after yourself, and when that heat wave hits you again of that, what was it, nasty 32 degrees, make sure you slip, slop, and slap.
Exactly right. See ya. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, man.